In May 2007, the U.S. government tapped local resident and lawyer Darrel Vandeveld to prosecute terror suspects at the Guantanamo Bay prison camp in Cuba. Vandeveld, a longtime local prosecutor and a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, accepted his new assignment with the enthusiasm of a true believer. Since the attacks of September 11, 2001, he had served as a military lawyer in Bosnia, Africa, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He had seen 2 friends killed, 2 commit suicide, and 1 suffer crippling injuries. He believed that those being held at Guantanamo were the worst of the worst, as the Bush administration had claimed. He was ready to bring them to justice. The first case Lieutenant Colonel Vandeveld was assigned to prosecute was that of Mohammed Jawad, an Afghani man who had been arrested as a teen on charges he threw a grenade into a military vehicle and wounded 2 American soldiers and their Afghani interpreter in 2002. At first glance, Vandeveld thought the case against Jawad would be a slam dunk. There was, he was told, a signed confession and eyewitnesses to the attack. But as Vandeveld delved deeper into the case, he came to believe that Jawad, and likely hundreds of others at the camp, were not only held on the flimsiest of evidence, but likely innocent. Vandeveld tried to arrange what he thought was a fair plea bargain for Jawad. When that was refused by his commanders, Vandeveld came to the conclusion that he could no longer participate in the trials at Guantanamo and remain true to his sworn oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law. He asked to be reassigned from the commissions and filed a statement with the court outlining his ethical concerns. He testified on behalf of the defense. Now that President Barack Obama has suspended the prosecutions at Guantanamo and pledged to close the camp within a year, Lieutenant Colonel Vandeveld, like others, is thinking about how the U.S. can wrest justice from the situation that evolved at Guantanamo.
Yeah, the problem with the detentions is that there was no systematic method for determining who should be detained and who shouldn't. And in many cases, unfortunately, those who ended up at Guantanamo should not have been there in the first place. They were either sold to U.S. forces for money by neighbors, by corrupt government officials, by supposed enemies, and it took a while for that situation to be sorted out, and I'm not sure it still is. But the first commander of the interrogations at that point, who has now resumed his position on the bench, Judge Dunleavy, made the comment at one point that half the people who were sent there originally shouldn't have been there. And I would say that probably, except for maybe a dozen and a half hardcore terrorists, war criminals who should be prosecuted, what you have there are people who would not be considered to be war criminals under any other regime or under any other legal circumstances. And the way to correct it is a vexing problem that the Obama administration is currently studying, and the goal is to close Guantanamo within a year. Presents a very real problem because you have 240 or so detainees who are still there, 60 of whom have been cleared for release by the Department of Defense, but they cannot be sent back to where they came from because they were either detained in Afghanistan or their countries of origin won't take them because they would face persecution there. And so it's a very, very vexing problem. I think what has to happen is a great deal of diplomacy to allow those who should not have been sent there in the first place to be resettled elsewhere. And if that's possible, great, but that remains to be seen. But I think in any event, Guantanamo will be closed within a year. Well, if they can be prosecuted in federal courts in the United States, we ought to, because we have the fairest, most transparent system of criminal justice in the world. And the Department of Justice has a very good record of prosecuting terrorists. If that cannot be done for legal reasons, because there might be constitutional restrictions now, given the way that we've treated them, given how long we've had them, if that's not possible, then we could either court-martial them or we could resume the military commissions in a modified format. And one of the problems that I saw when I was at Guantanamo is that there was no real sense of urgency about prosecuting these detainees, because I think everyone thought, well, as long as they're not being tried, they're still being held and kept away from the battlefield, and maybe there'll be a resolution at some point. But I don't think the thinking or the planning was anything more concrete than that.